Every sword ranking gets this backwards. The most lethal blade in a one-on-one fight consistently lost to swords that were slower, shorter, and less impressive. Here's why effectiveness on a battlefield has almost nothing to do with how dangerous a sword actually is. One metric: battlefield longevity. How long did each sword remain the primary military weapon before something better forced it out? And what did it actually take to replace it? Not duel records, not cutting tests, not legend. Real military adoption under real battlefield conditions. The results break almost every assumption you have walking in. Rank 8, katana. Start here, because this is where most rankings get destroyed in the comments. The katana is a masterpiece. The folding process, the differential hardening, the geometry, all of it is real. But here's what those rankings never tell you. The katana was never the primary weapon on a Japanese battlefield. Samurai arrived with bows, then spears. The katana came out last, when everything else had failed or broken. Historical records from the Sengoku period confirm that the Yari spear and the naginata were the weapons of mass battlefield deployment. The sword was personal, ceremonial, and secondary. And when it did enter combat, its limitations were structural, not cultural. The katana's hard edge was optimized for cutting unarmored flesh. Strike plate or heavy lamellar and the edge chips. Japanese swordsmanship manuals acknowledge this directly, developing specific techniques to target armor gaps rather than cut through steel. Exactly what European longsword masters were doing with half-swording 2 centuries earlier. The katana is one of history's finest cutting tools. It is not one of history's most dominant battlefield weapons. Those are two completely different things. Rank 7, rapier. The rapier killed more people in documented European history than almost any other sword. That is not an exaggeration. Civilian duel records from 16th and 17th century Spain, Italy, and France show the rapier dominating one-on-one encounters with terrifying efficiency. Its reach advantage was decisive. Its thrusting speed was unmatched. Then you put it on a battlefield and everything inverts. The length that made it lethal in a duel became a liability in close formation. Soldiers packed shoulder to shoulder cannot execute the precise footwork rapier technique demanded. The narrow blade that slipped between ribs in a duel bent or snapped under the lateral stress of a cavalry charge. Military commanders across Europe tried the rapier, evaluated it, and systematically replaced it with shorter, sturdier weapons. The rapier's battlefield service record is almost non-existent. It succeeded at the wrong scale. Rank 6, falchion. The falchion looks like a weapon designed by someone who wanted maximum damage with minimum thinking. Forward heavy blade, single edge, devastating chopping power. And for a brief period in the 13th and 14th centuries, it was genuinely widespread among European infantry. Its problem was adaptability. As armor improved, the falchion's chopping power became less relevant. You cannot chop through plate. You thrust through gaps. The falchion was not designed for that transition. Armies that needed to adapt to heavier armor abandoned it for more versatile weapons. It served a specific era well and then became obsolete when that era ended. Short battlefield lifespan, limited tactical flexibility. Effective for its moment, but its moment passed quickly. If this already contradicts what you thought you knew, subscribe. It gets more surprising from here. Rank 5, arming sword. Nobody makes movies about the arming sword. It does not have a mythology. It is not considered legendary. It is also the weapon that European knights carried for 4 consecutive centuries without significant replacement pressure, which tells you something the mythology cannot. The arming sword's strength was boring competence. It cut, it thrust. It worked with a shield. When shields declined and armor improved, it adapted, developing a more tapered profile for thrusting at plate gaps. It was never the best sword for any single scenario. It was reliably effective across all of them. From the 11th century Crusades through the 14th century, no army that adopted it felt compelled to abandon it entirely. Generalist weapons outlast specialists on real battlefields because real battlefields are unpredictable. The arming sword understood this before anyone had words for it. Rank 4, greatsword. The greatsword ranks higher than most people expect for a reason almost nobody discusses. German Landsknecht mercenaries carrying the Zweihander received double pay. Not because commanders liked the aesthetic, because those men were performing a specific, irreplaceable battlefield function that nothing else could replicate. Breaking pike formations. 16th century European battlefield tactics were dominated by dense blocks of pike-wielding infantry that could stop cavalry charges and grind through enemy lines. The greatsword's extended reach could sweep pike shafts aside, creating gaps for the infantry behind to exploit. It was not a general-purpose weapon. It was a tactical specialist that solved a problem no other sword could address at scale. The fact that armies paid a premium for greatsword specialists reveals battlefield value more honestly than any cutting test. You pay double for what you cannot replace. place. Rank 3. Longsword. The longsword is the only sword in history with an entire documented martial system built around it. Multiple independent European masters produced detailed combat manuals covering the longsword across 2 centuries. Lichtenauer in Germany, Fiore dei Liberi in Italy. These were not theoretical texts. They were practical training systems used by soldiers who fought in real wars. What those manuals reveal is the source of the longsword's durability. It could function as a cutting weapon, a thrusting weapon, a lever for controlling an opponent's blade, a short spear when gripped by the blade in half-swording, and a bludgeon when swung pommel first in armored grappling. No other sword had this range of documented tactical application. Weighing between 2.5 and 4 pounds, it was fast enough for unarmored combat and adaptable enough for fully armored opponents. The longsword did not dominate because it was the most lethal blade. It dominated because it was the most complete system. Rank 2. Gladius. The gladius is 18 inches long. By every visual metric of what a battlefield sword should be, it is underwhelming. It has no reach advantage, no dramatic cutting arc, nothing that looks impressive from a distance. It also helped Rome conquer the Mediterranean world and maintain military dominance for 5 centuries. That gap between appearance and outcome is exactly the point. The gladius was not designed to be lethal on its own. It was designed to be lethal inside a system. Roman legionaries used the scutum shield offensively, driving it forward to destabilize opponents, creating openings the gladius exploited with tight, fast thrusts. Historical sources document Roman legionaries delivering up to 4 stabs per second in close formation, compared to 1 slashing blow every 2 seconds with longer weapons. The Macedonian soldiers who faced the gladius at the Battle of Cynocephalae in 197 BC were reportedly horrified not by the sword's appearance, but by what it did to bodies at close range. Polybius recorded their reaction as psychological collapse. That is what a correctly designed system weapon does. It does not impress at a distance. It ends the fight before the enemy can recover. Rank 1. Saber. The saber is the correct answer, and almost no ranking gives it this position. Here's why it wins by a margin that is not close. The military saber remained the standard cavalry weapon across European and American armies from the 1630s through World War I. Nearly 3 centuries of continuous active military deployment without a superior sword-based replacement ever emerging. Saber charges were documented as tactically decisive at Eylau in 1807, where Murat's cavalry broke Russian artillery positions. The last U.S. cavalry saber was not officially retired until 1934. That is a battlefield service record that no other sword type in history approaches. But the reason the saber held that position reveals something more important than its design. It was trainable at scale. A cavalry recruit could develop functional saber technique in weeks. The curved blade's geometry made the slashing motion from horseback almost intuitive, converting the horse's momentum into cutting force without requiring years of precise technique development. Armies could equip thousands of soldiers with sabers, train them quickly, replace blades cheaply, and produce consistent battlefield results across multiple generations of recruits. The katana required a lifetime of training. The longsword required a martial system. The saber required a few weeks and a horse. Look at every sword that ranked high in this list. The gladius, the longsword, the saber. None of them were the most dangerous blade in a one-on-one fight between 2 skilled warriors. The rapier probably wins that contest. The katana makes a strong argument. But neither the rapier nor the katana could be multiplied across 10,000 soldiers and produce consistent, reliable, catastrophic results against an enemy army. Battlefield effectiveness was never a metallurgy question. It was never a lethality question. It was always a logistics question. How quickly can you train a soldier? How cheaply can you replace a broken blade? How consistently does the weapon perform when the person holding it is exhausted, terrified, and fighting in chaotic close quarters rather than a controlled duel? Every sword that dominated militarily answered those questions correctly. Every sword that failed answered the wrong question brilliantly. The most lethal sword and the most effective battlefield sword have almost never been the same weapon. That gap is not a failure of military thinking. It is the entire point. Armies do not need the most dangerous blade. They need the most deployable one. And that distinction changes every ranking you have ever seen.